I guess it was November of 1966. I was working for a clothing store in Gainesville, and I was in high school. And normally, after I got off work, I would go to the pool hall or whatever, and Mom calls it up. You need to come right home, there's men in Stockton. So we get there, and a guy named John Irv from American Realty throws this big map out on our living room floor. Takes up quite a bit of the floor. Of course, it was a small living room, and says, "We want to build a lake on your property." We sold 160 acres out of 1,700 or something, so it's less than 10%. But anyway, when we were visiting, I asked him, I said, "Well, what's going to feed, what's going to fill this lake up?" And he said, "Indian Creek." Well, this little creek that I'm stepping over is a tributary of Indian Creek, and I'm thinking, this ain't ever going to happen, And after it was over, and Mom decided to sell, I said, "Mom, you better get all your money up front on this deal," which I found out later she did. But anyway, to watch it, and of course they bulldozed all the big pine trees by the creeks and pushed them out in the lake and burned them. My mom hated that, but they needed to do that. I remember the coffer dam, and then the water kind of started rising and everything. And there was a lot of promotions. Most people won't know who Dan Blocker is, but he was Hoss on the television show Bonanza, which was very popular back in the 60s or whatever. And he came out, and they had helicopter rides, and Mom drank them in a helicopter ride because the roads on the east side weren't completed. They were just sand. So they would take people up in a helicopter and show them where their lot was. And that's the only time I've ever flown in a helicopter. That was pretty cool.
67, I was in the dairy barn milking about 4 o'clock one evening. Radio blasting, and I turned around, and this guy was standing. And we had a party bar, and he was standing there. Didn't have a hair on his head. And he said, "My name's John Erd." I don't know if you've heard that name or not, but it's on all the record. "I work with American Realty. We're going to build a lake here." First I'd heard about it, my brother-in-law first we'd heard about it. And he kept on going. And so after he left, we just had us a big laugh. And that was in May of 67. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I heard this. Counting us, they only dealt 12 people, families to buy.
I used to chase horses around on this old creek when I was a kid. An uncle of mine used to keep horses down here on Indian Creek, and we'd come over here and try to catch them old horses on Sunday afternoon and chase them around. Never did catch any of them, but we'd try.
In August, we moved out. We had the lease from the Turners. Bill Turner's mother. She was still alive. His dad was dead, but we had a long-term lease on that dairy from them. And so they had to buy our lease. It's just like buying land. They couldn't do nothing without buying our lease. And, of course, we sold it to them.
All right, tell us about the first time that you visited Lake Kiowa.
Dad had a dairy farm out here, and when I was a little kid, I'd come out here and play. I could step across a little creek which is the water crossing between 13 and 16 when I was a kid. And I had a lot of good times there, playing the hay barn and all that stuff. My father passed away when I was 9, and Mom leased the dairy out, and I didn't come out here much anymore.
With my parents, I was 17, I guess. They bought a lot in 1968, and then they built in 69. So I was 18.
When this place first opened, in order to make sales on the property and all, they had an open here and they had a meal here, and we were invited from Dallas to come up to see Lake Kiowa. And having been raised and gone to summers in Golden Lakes with my folks, the thought just appealed to me. And I had a boat So I thought, okay, so my wife and I came up, we ate, we saw the property, we talked to the people, and I bought a lot. That was back in '68.
Now, when I got here, actually, when we got here, there was not much of an entrance. I guess they had a teepee at the entrance. And then when you came down here to the lodge, there was the lodge. And then they were giving helicopter rides here. So I did take a helicopter ride.
You could see what was going on. They had all these airplane rides and banners being pulled, people jumping out of airplanes, parachutes everywhere when they was having these promotions. And they, you could buy these big nice lots for I think $5,900 then. That's promotions.
Yeah.
I remember that number, $5,900.
Yes.
When I came up here, the golf course wasn't here. The golf course had been drudged out or designed, but there wasn't any grass. There wasn't any, the roads were all dirt and sand. So the lake was nothing. There wasn't anything, there was hardly any water in the lake.
We bought here in 1974. We bought the
Jimmy
property,
helped
the
us
store
get the store.
in 1974. So we've been here since 1974 as far as buying, where we're at.
Well, the first time I actually came here was August of '74, and I came here because of employment. I was a nanny to somebody that owned a house here, and I've never left since.
First time I came here was in the spring of 1973, and my parents had bought a lot here, and they wanted me to come with them and decide where to build on that lot. And actually my aunt and uncle bought the adjacent lot, and it's the first two lots right next to the golf club on the 18th green. And we still have the house. I've modified it a few times. It's been our family gathering place since it was finished in 1974.
1975. Well, the first time I officially visited it, of course, I watched some from the roads and stuff as construction going on, but me and my wife came out and they had a tent set up at the entrance, and they had Dan Blocker of the Bonanza series out here helping promote this thing. And a salesman got in the car with us and took us around to try to show us some of the lake, and we got stuck in a sand bed. The roads weren't really even the roads at the time. They had just graded right-of-ways and whatever. You couldn't really even tell where the lake was going to be in most parts. They were building the cofferdam, as I recall, at the time. But that was my first trip inside.
We had mutual friends that I went to school with in Topeka, Kansas, and friends of ours that moved here said, you need to come see Lake Iowa. It's really neat. And Dale was thinking of retiring, and so we came down here. I should say he came down here, and he bought a house. And it is the house we still live in.
I visited Lake Kiowa in 1975. A friend of ours, Joe and Herman Adamson, had a place, and they had bought a lot on Blackfoot. So we came down, and my husband and Herman played golf, and we took my young son fishing and drove around and looked at Lake Kiowa. The lake was had water in it. It wasn't real full, but it had water in it, so it was a good experience. We bought a lot on the 10th anniversary in June of 1978, and we had to put up a deposit. They had to vote on you, and a friend of ours, Jim Foster, was president at that time, and he happened to be in my husband's golf group, so someone said, well, you got shoot in early that way. So I'm not sure about that, but they found out later that it was not in the bylaws that they could charge people to join and vote on them. But they didn't give us our money back because they had to use it to pay the employees.
We visited in 1968. It was owned by American Realty at that time. We bought 2 lots. We were very young. We lived in Grapevine. So we moved up here with 2 5-year-olds. No young people in the lake. Everybody was old. I felt like I was in a retirement home. So I have been here for 45 years now.
I was probably, I guess in the 7th grade. We lived in Gainesville, and our parents had found out about this place, and we came out. They were showing them lots, and they took us out here to the beach, and they had a temporary dam that they had held some water, and we just went swimming while they went shopping. That was my first memory. They had horses to ride. That's what the maintenance barn, where the maintenance barn is now, that's where the horses were kept. And so you could ride horses. I think they bought the lot in '68, and we built a house and moved here in '70.
Well, we lived in Dallas, and had 3 boys, and we were looking for a smaller school to get them into, and we kind of looked around the area, 75-mile radius of Dallas, because I had to work in the Dallas area, and we couldn't find anything. And our neighbor talked to us. He said, "Well, why don't you go up to Lake Kiowa and buy my lots?" Because he was in here at the very beginning on the sale, and he bought 2 lots. And so we come up here, looked at them, and bought them. And about 6 months later, we moved up here. Been here ever since. December 7th, 1972.
Pearl Harbor Day.
I have been living at Lake Kiowa since May of 1977. During that time period, I became a real estate broker shortly thereafter that in '78, and I've been selling real estate ever since.
I came with my brother and my parents in 1968, and my parents bought their first lot at that time.
Yeah, it was like a Cowboys and Indian theme. They had a fort look to the front gate. They actually had a big wall of lumber, like a fort, with lookout towers in it that you could actually climb up into, and that's what fronted the road. And you drove in, and it was a real small gatehouse. In fact, the way they kept people out was just a chain that they dropped on the ground, and you drove across it. They picked it up, put it back on the hook. But the clubhouse was an old wooded building with high lofted ceilings and big beams, with a big fireplace and with a pit with couches in it, and it just had that old rustic look to it. And now we're a lot more, I guess, modern, or everything from a standpoint of rustic has kind of gone away.
So how many houses have y'all lived in at Lake Kiowa?
She said 12. We've been on the lake, we've been on the golf course a couple of times, off the golf course, so we're back on the golf course.
9.
1.
3. I've lived in 3. I lived at 847 Kiowa Drive East for 22 years, and then at 1116 Kiowa Drive West for, 7-8 years. And now I'm at 102 Cocopah Cove. I've been there about 15, 16 years now.
1. We built our house and started it in September of 1983 and finished it in May of 1984.
I've lived in 9 different homes out here. My late husband was a contractor for a while and built several homes out here. So we would build a home, live in it, and move. So I've lived in several homes at the time.
Well, everybody needs to have 2 houses. We've got the lake house, and then we bought another house over on Mohican that's our primary residence. So those 2 are the only 2 we've had.
I've lived in 8 total.
Actually, just 2. I've owned 4, but just 2.
Myself, permanently, I've lived in 1.
So what is the funniest story you can share with us about Lake Kiowa or living here?
We were talking about that. I mean, I was young back then, so I was kind of a little rowdy. So at the gate, they used to have a guard named Mr. Lynch. And the gate was just I think it was just one little shack, little bitty thing. And he used to sit out in a folding chair, and they had a chain that would go across the road there, and when you came in, he'd just drop the chain. Then you drive on through. Well, one night I got a little anxious, I guess, and I came through a little too quick before he had a chance to drop the chain. So I get home, I live over on Seminole, and the phone rings, and it's Mr. Lewis. He said, Gary, would you mind bringing that chain back up here to the gate? It was on the front of my car.
Have the tags or any of that. He just knew who you were.
I mean, there were just so many people coming through here. There wasn't that many, so it wasn't. He knew everybody that came through. So,
you know, one interesting thing, not necessarily funny, but interesting. When I first came out here in '68, this is Lake Kiowa. Except I came here to this building, and I walked out on the dock, and there was no lake. Now, way out in the middle, what looked like maybe 2 feet deep was maybe it looked like a stock tank for animals, for cows, you know, like you see. And I mean, it was just a little puddle out in the middle. And this is like Kiowa. And so when I built my house, I built my house on the shoreline, but there was no water yet at the time I did it. And that was fun. So when we first bought and went to the east side from here, we drove in front of the dam because the bridge wasn't finished behind it and there was no water to worry about. So we actually drove on the bottom of the lake to get over to the east side.
Well, one of the funny things is when we had that old lodge, you know, and it had leaks everywhere. We always had a great time in there, but you'd go into the restroom and you'd be dodging the rain and stuff like that. But that was a great place to be. That old lodge was wonderful.
The funniest, though, was when I first came here, security had their little house. It looked like a two-holer. It looked like an outhouse, and that's what security had at the main gate. And when we were on the board, when I was on the board in the 80s, we built a security house down there and moved all of security down there. But
it's my daughter she's grown, she has children in college now, and my niece decided one Thanksgiving when we were all here and everybody was very busy at Thanksgiving, and they kept saying, can we just ride our bikes around the lake? And we said, it's too far. No, you never make it. And I don't guess anyone ever said, no, you can't. So they did, and they set out, and then they realized the error of their ways because they're riding bicycles and they're exhausted and they have to stop and rest. There were no cell phones. And they're like, oh my goodness, we're going to get in so much trouble. And it got later and later, and they worried more and had so much anxiety. Over the years, they've embellished that story. You would think that they had been in the jungle somewhere. But they finally made it back to the house, so relieved to be there, and they ran in, and no one had missed them or realized they were gone.
Well, one of them was our neighbor, picked out their lot by walking through the lake bed before there was any water out there. And so that's how they picked out their lot.
One day Max came in and told Dorothy, he said, I'm going to go mow the lake. And she said, how do you mean mow the lake? He said, it has weeds in it. So he goes and mows it. There was a group of women that I played with, but I wasn't with them at this time. They would start out early in the morning to play golf, get as early a tea time as they could, 7 or 7:30. They would make their lunch, and they would go out, and it would take them several hours to play. So when they got hungry, they would go find a shade tree and park underneath it and eat their lunch. Then when they got through eating, they'd start playing again. So it took a day to do it almost.
Well, probably when I moved in the house on the number 18 Green, we had bought a dog for the girls, and we decided to put a fence up. So I worked in the POA office down here in the old facilities. And so I came home for lunch, and I was sitting there watching the golfers hit their balls up on the green, and all of a sudden I saw a dog jump over the fence get the ball, jump back over the fence, and lay it down. He did it twice, and I just sat there like a dodo, not knowing what to do. So I went out and apologized to the golfers, which they weren't happy campers, but I eventually had to get rid of the dog because he liked the people's golf balls.
Okay. You know, the one that I can tell you is several years ago, and I want to say it was probably early 70s, I was working on the golf course, and a friend of mine who also lived out here, he was a year or two younger than me, he worked there as well. And we had an old fire truck that they kept at the barn, the maintenance barn. The lodge, not the lodge, but a car drove up here on Monday. They were from Dallas, and they parked it right out in front of the old lodge, and it caught on fire. So they get a call in, and I'm getting off work, and a bunch of these old guys run in there and jump in the truck. And so I decided, Lance Johnson and I decided we're going to jump on the back of it and see where the fire was. So we rode the fire truck round to the lodge, and sure enough, there's this car on fire. Well, they pull up in the middle of the street, and of course everything's closed, there's nobody else around, and they start to try to put this fire out. They pull all the hoses out, and these guys look like Keystone Cops. You know, they're all running around, bumping into one another, and we're sitting back on the putting green watching them. And they're kind of fiddling around, and I tell Lance, I said, why don't you go turn a pump on the golf course, because I think they're going to need some help. We had a hose over on the putting green that had a big sprinkler head on it. And so he takes off to go turn the pump on. Well, in the meantime, these guys get the hose out, and there's two guys holding the end of it, and they yell back, say, turn the pump on, Harry. And so he does, and about that time, this little bitty stream of water comes out the end of this fire hose. And they turn around and yell at him again, say, turn the pump on. And he says, it is on. And it's still just that little bitty stream. And so by this time, the pump's on, and I plug the hose in to the quick coupler, and I'm shooting water over the top of the fire truck onto the top of the lodge, because it was starting to smolder. It had big cedar-shaped shingles, and it was catching on fire, so I was wetting it down. And so these guys, and about that time, this tire explodes, and they all think it's the gas tank, so they all run back around the truck, and then they get these cans. Two guys get these cans with some liquid in it, and they go over there, and they're squirting this big old fire with these little bitty cans of whatever it was, and they're still messing with the hose and still fighting one another about, you know, turning to get the pump on, why isn't the water coming out? And so anyway, we're sitting back on the putting green just shooting water over that fire truck, and we put the car out, and it's all over with, and these guys never did get that water out of the pump truck. But it was just funny to watch these men running around trying to figure out what was wrong. And by the end of it, you know, the car, all the tires blew up, but the gas tank never did for some reason. But the board of directors, I guess it was, they gave us some kind of an award back then for putting the fire out and saving the lodge, the old lodge. What happened was they come to find out, dirt daubers had built a nest in the end of the hose, so it was plugged up.
I think one of the funniest was the carnival. We came down to where the carnival and had a 4-year-old with us, and they had a beanbag toss, and he just walked up and put it in the nose or whatever it was, and the man said, oh, no, you have to stand behind this line, this rope on the ground. So he looked at the rope for a while, and he walked down and picked it up and moved it up to the clown and dropped his beanbag in. That's always stuck with me. That was a funny one. When we moved here, David, our youngest, was in kindergarten, and so I took him over there. You know, here's this cement floor building with a light bulb hanging down for the light, and the teacher had the carpet squares in one corner for story time, you know. I came home and told Lex, okay, David's going to school in Gainesville. He's not going there. He said, what's wrong with him? I said, well, and I told him all those things. He said, well, how's the teacher? And I said, oh, I think she's fine. He said, well, get yourself over there and help her once a week, and check her out. And so I helped her one day a week, and her name was Mrs. Dozier, and she
Turned
was
out to be a jewel.
wonderful teacher, and it didn't matter if it was a light bulb hanging down and carpet squares on the floor. That was an eye-opening for me because, of course, the kindergarten in Dallas was super,
there.
but it was the teacher that counted.
What are some of the best memories of living at Lake Kiowa?
You know, one of them that always comes up, because I play a lot of golf, and I go around the number 9, the tee box. And I remember one Thanksgiving, my dad and I were out there hunting quail on the tee box.
They voted me first president of the water company, and then after I got everybody's appointments, they said, "Now, are you going to resign from the POA board?" And I said, "Heavens, no! I hereby resign from the water board." And I nominated Bill Lynn as the president, and I went on that way.
So we would come up on the weekends when I'd get out of school, and then in the summertime I would come up and spend the summer and play golf with my friends. And we'd play bingo on Wednesday night, and my husband would come up and we would eat here at the lodge and play bingo, which was a fun thing to do.
Oh my goodness. That was back in 1977. So Lake Kiowa was a forest in those days. It was the most quaint, lovely community you can imagine. We had a little wooden bridge you go across with all the windy, twisty roads, covered tree line, wildlife everywhere. We had deer that came in our yard. Animals of all sorts came here in those days.
Mom built a little house in 1970. And if you were to see it today, it's like a time capsule. It's got wood, paneling, avocado formica cabinets or countertops. I haven't let my wife change it any, I just like it the way it is. And we've used it a lot. So I got to spend the summers of 70 and 71 out here. And the lake actually filled up in the latter part of September on Jim Faulkner's bachelor party. And it had rained a couple days, and we were out there. And Saturday morning, they had put stakes along our property, and Mom had even had American Realty build us a dock, which is still there. And that water hit every one of those stakes. And so when you would go out on the lake, there might be 2 or 3 boats out there. I mean, if there was more than 3 or 4, you'd say, what are these people doing out there? And you didn't have any tea times. I mean, you just walked up and played.
I was here with my family, here at the lodge when the lake filled up with water. I think it was on a Friday or Saturday night. And there was just a handful of people here. And everybody was just having a good time, and it was just a great feeling for everybody that the lake finally filled up,
Early on, when the old lodge was here, there used to really be a lot of fun times at the lodge. It was run independently at the time, and the guy that was running at the time, he was all the time searching for ways to make people get interested and have fun and come and spend time at the lodge. And that and fishing and golfing, it's really been a fun time the whole time.
It's called the Time Out for Living. I don't remember it being called that. It's called the Communicate Now course. And here's pictures of the Little Johns. They were out here. They were here when we moved here. And 2 of the gals, Dorothy Baskett and Isabel Hayes, mimeographed it, stapled it together, and delivered it by golf cart. Oh, that's right, we had P.O. boxes up at the grocery store. So the one going out on the left-hand side, well, it was the only one there. And that's right.
If I had a dime for every circle I made trying to teach a kid to ski, I could pay this month's dues. We had a lot of fun.
Oh, I don't know. I was a kid when we first moved out here, and I liked everything about it. I was a fisherman, and it was a good fishing lake from the get-go. And I loved to play golf, and we had a golf cart, and I played all the time. There weren't many people here, so it was, matter of fact, you didn't even have to come sign in at the pro shop. You just started wherever you wanted to, and you'd go play golf. And when you did go by the shop, you signed in. And I loved to water ski, and we had a boat. We lived on the water, so there weren't many people out here, so there never, ever was a crowd. And it was just like a private, club. And it was
all the people and things that started back then. Everything was volunteer. We built this building and a lot of fire department and buildings and stuff like that with engineers that volunteered their time and people like that. And that's one of my best memories of is the people that you were involved with back then, that I was involved with back then, because they were very giving of their time, no matter what their profession was.
Our street has a block party every year, and we all look forward to that.
We did have some drama back in the 1980s. We had a trilogy of weather events. 1980 had 3 years of drought. In fact, the lake was so low you could walk across parts of it. And then in 81, we had this flood, and it rained and rained and rained for 13 inches, a whole day and a half. The water was going over the dam at 5 feet level for an entire week. Then the next event was the ice storm, and it came, I think, in 81. The lake froze entirely over. It's the only time in all my 40 years I've ever seen the lake freeze over entirely. And I had a customer who ice skated the entire lake.
Dorothy Basket, when she would perform for, they used, I can't remember what they called it. But anyway, fundraisers, particularly for the
Follies.
Yes, and she would be Minnie Pearl, or she'd be a lounge singer, or she would be this or that, and just so funny.
Of course, lawnmowers wasn't on every block then out there. Out here, the kids. That was back when kids still mowed the yards, and our 2 oldest had an old motorbike and a red wagon, and they pulled their old lawnmower everywhere they went around the lake, across the bridges.
And mowed all of the elderly people's yards for them.
So what has changed the most over the years?
I think what's changed most over the years is the amount of houses and people out here.
Houses?
The size of the houses.
Size of the houses.
Population explosion, housing explosion.
The density. More people.
They used to have post office box up at the little
post
store.
office,
was not mail. The mail was not delivered to your house.
Yeah, P.O. box.
P.O. box. Trash wasn't delivered. I don't even remember what we did with the trash. You had to haul your own trash.
Take the trash to the dump down here.
This is a really vibrant little community. I can remember I was probably mowing in the 1980s or so, and a school bus came by. And I went, wow, there's enough kids out here for a school bus. Of course, now there are all kinds of school buses, and there's all kinds of kids and younger families.
But, the things have happened. Like I said, I play golf, and from the way the golf course has evolved from what it was in the beginning to what it is now, because it's made huge steps forward to get to where it is. They've done a huge number of improvements out here, from the roads, from dirt roads to what we have now. And it's amazing what's been done.
When they made the golf courses, all they did was they cleared a path, got all the trash out of the way, left the trash at the end, put dirt over it, put a flag on it, and that was the green. Now, after 10 or 15 years, the poor greens didn't have proper drainage. there was very little dirt in some areas and a lot in others, and the greens died in the summer. And it happened, and it happened, and it happened year after year. And we tried to find out what, and we finally ended up getting a gentleman down from Texas A&M, an anthropologist who came down here and did borings and everything else, and finally he told us what we had to do. He said the only way you can save this is to actually dig out the entire green and take the garbage out of it and replace it with good dirt, and which of course we did. It took a long time, but we found tree stumps, we found an old refrigerator that was dead, we found broken parts from cars or trucks and stuff, because when they built it, they just pushed them up there and they just put dirt over it and put a flag on it. That was the green.
Like she said, we used to come down here they used to have a dance every Friday night, and everybody get together and have drinks and party and have a good time. So.
Well, what has changed most is the obvious growth of the community, and the food at the lodge has changed the most. The food at the old lodge was quaint. I loved it, but it was pretty bad food, and it was really not much but burgers. So nobody misses the old lodge food.
Probably the facilities and the growth. It's grown tremendously in the last few years, and of course our facilities are second to none, as far as I'm concerned. And,
excellent production, and it brought the people together to the lodge to meet more people, and I don't know what we'd do without the lodge. Oh, meet on Sundays. They even let us play golf sometimes. People weren't too pleased with playing golf on Sundays, but others didn't mind.
Well, the golf course has changed a lot, because when we first started playing golf in the 80s, every summer we'd go to, the greens would burn up, and so we'd have temporary greens, and we'd have to play on temporary greens every year. And then in the fall it would start again and be fun. But they found out when they redid the course several years ago, when they tore the greens up, the company that had built Lake Kiowa raked up all of the trees and the stumps and trash and then built a green over it. And that was the reason that the greens would burn out every year. They weren't made the way they should be.
Primarily just the population and, the demographics.
I guess the growth in the population has changed the most. When I worked in the POA office, there were very few homes, maybe 100, and I don't really know how many homes there are now. But I would say that the young people have come in, which is great, because when I moved here, no young couples whatsoever except me and my family. So I'm welcoming all the new people, and it's keeping the lake alive, and I think that's great.
Obviously, the number of people, because back then, if they wanted to have a golf tournament, they had to actually hold the tournaments on their busiest holidays so they could get enough people together just to have a field. And even then, they'd only have 30 or 40 players. So the fact that it's as big as it is, which even back then, nobody thought it would grow like that, I don't think. And it took a long time to take off, but everything's changed. This isn't the same building. The golf course is 100 times better than what it was when it opened up. The front entrance doesn't look the same, but I guess the one thing that's changed more than anything is just the sheer number of people. Back in that early day, it cost nothing hardly to be a member. I don't remember what the dues were, but it was small. Water was $48 a year, unlimited use.
What groups and activities have y'all been involved in?
We own a business. We own Lake Kiowa Septic.
So we're in here.
We put nearly 800 of the septics in here.
Golf, women's club, that's pretty much it.
back in the mid-'80s, I was asked to sit on the board, so I stayed on the POA board here. I was over security for a while, and then getting over that, I lucked out into helping buy the water company here, which was going bankrupt. And they were already up for sale, and I was the second in the POA board that worked on it. The first guy worked on it, and then he finished his term for public office. So I took over from him, and so I was able to close the final deal that bought us the water company.
Yeah, back in the
That was
early
that was the only thing up there. That was the only
yeah,
store
we had the
up
only
there.
store in the post office. We had 175 post office boxes.
Yeah, we had the post office too.
Certainly every 4th of July parade, I don't know that we've ever missed one. And we always decorate both golf carts and just act ridiculous.
Meeting my husband and just living here in general, it's a great place to live. I kind of think we live in a bubble here, the way the world is today. There's a lot of craziness in the world, and I think we're somewhat insulated from it, which is good, really.
I loved the old entrance with the Indian figures and the block letters of Lake Kiowa, and just everything was fun. The lodge had hitching post parking places. They didn't actually hitch horses there, but I ran into them a few times, and it had a lot of personality.
You know, it's kind of like an island. When you come in here, you can just kind of shut the rest of the world off, and if you want to, you can. Right? And just enjoy the amenities, enjoy the people. I'm an ardent fisherman. Have been since the first time I come out here. You know, I've got the lake record of the biggest bass, and then I've got several trophies at home from back in the late 70s and early 80s from fishing tournaments, even back then. So.
Since I started working, I wasn't all that involved. Oh, I did with golf, and I was president of women's golf for a year. 1996. Oh, well, of course, yes. I guess I was a member of the women's club, and the golf, and bridge, and so I really was pretty active.
And I went in as vice president under Nelda Toll, and I have served as president 2 different times at Lake Kiowa. I was president of Red River, which was a golf association that we could play in, that we were members of. I was president of Texoma, which is a golf association that we still play in. And I have been the worship leader at the chapel since 2000. So this is my 19th year as being worship leader, and we have a great chapel. We have 2 ministers. We have a Baptist minister, Brother J. Ray Smith, and a Presbyterian minister, Brother John Hare from town. And they take turns. We have a choir here at Lake Kiowa, and we sing. We sing for the 4th of July, and we sing for the Christmas beginning at Thanksgiving.
Well, you name it, I've been there. But I said, we started out here, what we call the Follies. It was a talent show. Several of us were in it, which had no talent, but there were very few that did have talent. And I was a clown for several years, got pie in my face, different things, which was very fun at the time. I've been in Gourmet, I've been the Women's Club, and after I retired, I did join the WGA and took up golf, but I was way in my 60s before I took up golf. So I'm not good, but I'm out there playing twice a week.
Like I said, president of the board for a couple of years, and served in town on the appraisal board and that kind of stuff.
Appraisal board.
First went on the school board from Lake Kiowa to Kalispell for 12 years. I spent on that 73, I think, or to 85, I think, something like that in there. And spent 20 some years on the volunteer fire department from shortly after it was started until 1997. So we, involved with a lot of good people, and that's my most precious memory of Lake Kiowa and stuff. But
yeah, I used to sell real estate here. I sold real estate for 10 years, and that's what that was my line. I would say you can be just as private as you want to be, or just as active as you want to be. You can do something twice a day if you want to.
Oh, obviously all the golf groups, the ladies in the WGA and the MGA, and then, from time to time with the boards, and then back when we had I can't remember if it's called the Fireman's Follies or what, where we did plays to raise money for the fire department, volunteer fire department. I was involved with that for a few years.
I've been involved in the Women's Club, the Women's Golf Association, and all that. I have served in the capacity of the Lake Kiowa Communique Advertising Director early in the 80s for about 3 or 4 years. And then I wrote an article for the Gainesville newspaper called The Smoke Signals.
My brother worked on the golf course, and he was working on the golf course when it opened, or before it opened, in, I believe he said it was the spring of 1970. Women's Club and the things that, I've always been a member of a gourmet group because I love to cook. And I've attended Garden and Nature and book review and some of those things. I was secretary, of course, recording secretary for 2 different Women's Club presidents, and then I was president of Women's Club 2005 to 2006. And Mother had been president of Women's Club in 1986-87. So we're the first and possibly, and only to this date, mother-daughter presidents of Women's Club. But having been here as long as we have, I guess it was bound to happen.
And I ran for the board in the 90s, and in about 93 I was elected to the board and I became president. I was president for 2 years. That was back when we were rebuilding the golf courses.
There was a piece here that was in, this was 1984, and I'm going to assume this was, it's People and Places. I'm not sure. It was probably a section of the Gainesville Register, but a group picture of people out here, and it says Kiowans honored for community contributions, and Mother's pictures in here. My father was always supportive of any of the fundraisers. He was a member of the Men's Golf Association and the Fishing Club, and Mother was too. Mother named the water coves of the lake, and also she submitted the name, and it was chosen the communique when they started publishing that.
What makes Kiowa so special?
You're driving down a country road, and suddenly you come upon Lake Kiowa, and you drive in, and it's just this kind of amazing development.
Certain people.
The people. Yeah.
But it was such a small community for so long. I mean, 300 houses versus more than 1,200 now, probably. And it was so unique in that respect that everybody just got along and pulled together and made things happen. Got my real estate license and would work with Mother. And it was so easy to sell Lake Kiowa because it was just, I mean, it was just such a wonderful place and beautiful, and still is.
Well, for one thing, Kiowa and I kind of grew up together. So the specialty for me is that I had a 3-mile drive to work. I made friends that are everlasting, that are like family, actually. I've helped a lot of people buy and sell through generations. And driving down the road, waving at people as you go who have been a part of your life for 40 years. And it's just heartwarming and lovely. And Lake Kiowa, to me, is one of the most special places you'll ever go. I've traveled and traveled, but I always want to come home to Lake Kiowa.
According to Mom, and when American Realty sold these lots, they froze the dues at $125 a year. So, they would guarantee people that your dues won't go up. Well, in the 70s, there was a lot of inflation, and they were literally passing the hat to make this thing go. I have a great sense of admiration for what I call the forefathers of this place that kept it going until they could raise the dues and buy the water department and do everything. The people at the early stages back in the 70s and 80s are to be commended because they didn't have much money to work with, and they really made this place and gave it the foundation that we have today. Then when we got back, we got back to Texas in '77, and we had young kids, and we had friends and family and boating
and all of the things like the 4th of July celebration, was just huge and so wonderful, such a community event.
Well, I think the community itself and the fact it's close to a town, and now we even have a little store out front, and everybody's so friendly, and it's a relaxing area to live in because most everybody's just having a good time.
I guess I would have to say to people, if you have any problems or you need any help, everyone's always willing to help. When my husband died in the end of 2016, it was unbelievable at the people that came and brought food and caring and cards. And I think overall it's just the people are wonderful out here.
And to see the enjoyment that my family and friends have gotten here, that's kind of made the cost and all the work of keeping it up worthwhile.
Well, I think the people, and I, especially for women, all the little subgroups of the women's club, there's Bible study, quilting, painting, all of it, whatever interest you're in.
There's something there for everybody.
Well, obviously the people, early on, a lot of things that the association couldn't afford to pay for, the people donated money, like on the golf course when they couldn't fertilize it, couldn't afford to fertilize the golf course. Well, everybody picked a fairway and they paid to have that fairway fertilized. But it's a great place to live.
Yeah.
I've lived in 3 or 4 different places in the state of Texas, and I always missed Kiowa, and I'm glad that I came back. I've always loved living out here, even when I was young. It was just fun to be here. Everything kind of complements itself, so it's a real quiet, dark at night place to live, and it's in the country, and there's no traffic, or at least not used to be.
Probably the people. I've met so many nice people and fun people, and everyone to my knowledge, to me, are very friendly.
It's special because it has always, even now with more and more people, had a very strong sense of community and neighborliness. And it used to be that people never passed each other without waving. Most still do wave, but a lot of the newer ones don't realize, hey, that's just part of living here.
By and large, just the community spirit.
The people mainly, I guess, but the security, the golf course, the lake.
You know, when I was working, I worked in Dallas and I traveled a lot, and it was like coming back from vacation. Every time you turned to head back north, heading into the gate, it was like just fairytale world.
It's just everybody seemed so happy all the time.
Like a second home to us, actually. Everything we do
revolves around Kiowa.
And I love it. I can't tell you how much I love living here.
I feel like you're on vacation all the time.
I wouldn't want to live anywhere else.
No, I wouldn't live anywhere.